Hey now, good morning. Happy Monday, PASW staff, clients, and we have friends joining us. Thank you for the friends joining us. If people want to play along, this is Film Scoring Monday. We look at, this is also film history and music supervision, but we like to call it Film Scoring Monday because simplifying is good. And the world is so confusing and chaotic sometimes. So simplifying it is what I try to do. That's what I'm all about, Mr. Simple. So last week, Willy Wonka, very, very nice job on making it. And it's interesting that we discovered together, it's a dark, sinister movie, but it's supposed to be for kids. But because of Gene Wilder, this was our thesis, and because of the music, the very charming, whimsical score by Leslie Bricusse, it ended up working, as opposed to being a really scary, messed up movie. It's interesting to see some of the elements, because why do these movies work? Why are we still talking about some of these movies? What did they get right? And what did they not get right? Sometimes it's just based on luck. Sometimes it's all these things of good hard work, of people coming in saying, use this song instead of this song. We've seen how certain things work. Sometimes they don't work. So this is our week of German music, and we're going to look at Germany. It sounds a little bit scary, but we'll make it safe, because we're going to look at German composers this week, and we're going to look at a very famous German film, because we're grouping subjects together as opposed to random stuff each day. I want you to see the connection each day between these things. Last week we jumped around neighborhoods in LA. We looked at Koreatown and Chinatown, and see the immigration from San Francisco down to LA. In the 1880s, and how those, with 1880s with Chinatown, and then Koreans came. Koreatown, was kind of called that later, but that was the golden age of Hollywood in the 20s, 30s, and then Koreatown, got that name about in the 70s, so 1970s. And then what else? I mean, then we also looked at Pasadena, which also came around the 1870s, 1880s. It's very fun to see the development of LA and how all those people from Indiana came because of the cold weather. So, it's just good putting these pieces together. So, like I said, German music, German theme this week. So today, it's a little scary. If you don't like horror movies, this is 1922. But if you still don't like 1922 horror movies, just don't watch it. It's okay. It's not, but 1922, my math is right. That's 100 years ago. So it's not going to be, a lot of bullets whizzing by and blood. A little bit of blood, actually. So having said all that, today, we're going to look at the 1922 classic German film, Nosferatu. They call it a symphony of horror, and it really is, Nosferatu. Probably one of the biggest examples, maybe second, or of the silent German expressionism. What is German expressionism? In cinema, we know a little bit about that because we've talked a lot about film noir in the 40s and 50s. Remember, Hollywood loved film noir. Well, most of that came from German expressionism. And that is what we're talking about. That's pretty much before World War I. So that's like the early 20th century, okay? And by 1922, World War I ended, but a lot of art, and the art, it's mostly a lot of shadows. The lighting is very, very moody. The angles are kind of high angles, kind of like these, it's kind of dreamlike in some ways, but dark dreamlike, just very, quite disturbing. So that's German expressionism, and that's what people in the 40s, that film. A lot of them were German directors, and European directors that came to write movies for LA, and write scripts for LA, and make movies that were heavily influenced by deep shadows, dark shadows, stylistic, black and white. A lot of that comes from German expressionism. And mostly the master we're talking about is F.W. Murnau. Murnau is the director of this movie. And this very famous. You've probably seen certain, there's been a lot of remakes and knockoffs, but Max Schreck is the main guy. And this is kind of the unofficial adaptation, because they got legal problems here, because there was a lawsuit, but of Bram Stoker's Dracula. He's not Dracula, but that novel, Bram Stoker, very famous, 1897. So this movie comes out about 20 years after that. So it's kind of a new, it's kind of new. But Murnau, one of the icons. I mean, I don't particularly love and know that much about the silent film era. It's good for our purposes because I don't need to take out the dialogue, because there is no dialogue. But German, he's a German director, and a lot of people quote him as one of the father of German cinema, one of the biggest, very important directors that use the camera to kind of to get into the real emotional state of the characters, because it's kind of, as we're going to see, the emotional state of the characters, especially the woman at the end, very, very, and also it's not overacting so much, but a little bit, but it is, because you can't say anything, so you see their core. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's a little corny, but this definitely worked. And so Murnau was influenced a lot by Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, two other huge German philosophers that we can talk about this week a little bit. I don't want to get too pessimistic, but this kind of German thought, and I don't even want to go into Nazism, but of the Superman, and that man is powerful, and that we have the ability, we have extreme freedom to have these thoughts. Something we'll take a look at this week. So Murnau came to LA after this movie. So he comes to LA around 1926, and then Sunrise is kind of his big movie that a lot of, if you take a film history class, you'll see Sunrise. You might see this movie too. You'll see Sunrise, and a lot of people say it's one of the greatest movies ever made. It's hard. If you like silent movies, it's fine. If you don't, then it's going to be kind of a little bit tough to get to. But so he comes to LA, but he's born in 1888 in Germany, and he dies young. He actually dies in Santa Barbara on PCH. His driver got out of the way of this truck that was coming, and he suffered a head injury. So he's dead at 42. So 1931, he's dead. So that's really unfortunate. He was a young guy, very so he could have done a lot more movies, although he did quite a bit of work. You want to go over there? It's kind of creepy, but let's leave Hollywood, because we should play along with these rules that I've set in motion. And this is the exteriors of Transylvania, of where they shot on location. This is Slovakia, northern Slovakia, and they call this the Orava Castle. So Orava Castle, sitting above this village, or Orava Castle, maybe. I'm not German, so it could be one of those. What's coming out in 22? Because, I mean, if we're still in the silent era, we still have 5 years before talkies come out. So people are going to the cinema for sure, but mostly it's radio. People are loving their radios. Sirius XM, no. So mostly radio. About 500 commercial radio stations are in operation all over the country in the United States. And then we get the first radio broadcasts in Europe, like in Britain and France. So people are kind of glued to that. So Nosferatu, it's kind of based a little bit on, like I said, Dracula. Premiered in Berlin in March. This was, and Max Schreck, what a great role, for him. Really important role. And there was plagiarism, because Stoker's widow sued the film, because they were like, she's like, this is my husband's, Abraham Stoker's, this is his book. And then the widow, actually, she won and got all the copies destroyed. This is a good way to get revenge. No, not really. So some of the versions survived. Some, this was kind of suppressed. It was released in the United States by 1929, and that's why it won it was part of the first Academy Awards, because that's 1929. So it did get Best Picture, but it was suppressed for a long time. Original score by, what do you think? A German, right? Hans Erdmann. Erdmann performed this with an orchestra at the premiere in Berlin. It must have been really exciting to get that. A lot of the score was lost. A lot of it was adapted by other composers. And then, throughout, a lot of other composers have taken, the opportunity to rescore this. But what we'll hear, I think, has some Hans Erdmann of his original score. So, let's take a look at the scene. I mean, it's a little bit scary. This is toward the end. The Orlok is, Nosferatu. He comes in and he wants to drink her, the star's blood. And this is good. He scares her, he terrifies her. And we'll see afterwards that as soon as the sun comes up and rises, that Orlok vanishes. But that's after, drinking her blood. So, of course, she doesn't die. She lives long enough, to get back with her husband. But that happens after. Let's see the anticipation. Let's see this very, very creepy scene of him coming to find her and look for her. So let's take a look. Pretty intense. What is it? The music is loud, right? It's very loud, very heavily orchestrated. This could sound like almost Mahler. Mahler could have maybe written some of this. German composers definitely, take this side. The big thing I hear and see is drama. It's very dramatic music. It's very, not over the top, but a little bit dramatic. It's very dramatic. It's got to be, because she's, and there's that hit point. We've talked about hit points with Batman and other things, and I won't make you do that for this. We don't have to do that every time. I just wanted you to know about it. But that hit point with the cymbal crash, right? With her, when he grabs her heart, and she's just like that. Very dramatic. But let's see what it looks like just without any music and see what you think. Still dramatic, right? Because the German expressionism, it's very dark and shadowy, and it's going to be scary no matter what, I think. I guess if you put a cartoon score, I guess it could be funny, but it's so stylistic that it's hard to change. You're very much in this world of Nosferatu, so anything you do is going to be creepy, even if it was just footsteps and there was no score, still be very scary. It's hard to not make this scary, because the German the expressionism in this is very, very important, very, right in your face. This isn't a subtle scene at all. So come up with something spooky, for this scene. Something that it doesn't have to be German. I was thinking about making you choose German, but it doesn't have to be German. but come up with something scary for this great scene as he's approaching. It's just terrifying. I know my dad loves this scene, loves this movie. A lot of people do. It's a classic. That's why I choose classics, because it's good to know about some of these movies too, and also to think about, I wonder what music fits. A lot of people say that, and you're like, well, why do we talk about all these things still if this is 100 years ago? A lot of people say that this was pretty big because it set, we have templates, formulas that we follow, so that it set that for horror films to follow. A lot of the horror movies that came after this followed this template of how to be scary, because you'll get so many vampire, Frankenstein, so many movies that that they're still making 100 years later, today. But it goes a lot of this goes back to Nosferatu in 1922 and Murnau's portrayal of this, of this very frightening vampire. So that's why it's important. After people saw this, they started really noticing, wow, you can really be effective and scary with cinema. It can really scare people, and I'm sure a lot of people were deathly afraid, especially when you add the scary music. So find some scary music, have fun with this. And then we're going to look at some German composers. We're going to recap Mendelssohn and Wagner, and I don't want to tell you too much, because then you won't come, and I need you to show up tomorrow. Okay, so get that into me tomorrow. Have a great rest of the week. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow. Okay, bye.